Well, I think I remembered the other thing I was going to mention at the beginning. Um, right over here behind my shoulder on my back wall here is a map basically of Israel, all in Hebrew. Let's see, it's reversed because the shoreline should be to the west, on the west. But anyway, with some nice biblical, I think it's got David and Goliath there, right about there. I bought that at the King David Hotel in Jerusalem in, must have been January of 1987. That's the one time I was in Israel and Janice was with me, and I know we were there together, and it was kind of a big purchase, and I was hesitant, but my honey encouraged me. Of course, we later got it framed and all that. It's really, really pretty. Well, back to Noah here. So, mentioned that the prophet is the fundamental category in Islam for, like sort of the ultimate human religious category. And the prophet is inevitably a passive instrument, mouthpiece for God. Yeah, I mean, that's probably especially the case with Muhammad because of the Quran. Another thing that is often associated with the prophet in the Quran is a book, having a book. In fact, I think prophets and belief in prophets is one of the fundamental theological tenets or convictions of Islam. Prophets have some kind of book. Messengers are another category. Whether or not it was supposed to be something different in the writing of the Quran, messenger certainly came to mean something different in subsequent Islamic interpretation. So a messenger could be somebody who preaches but is not given a book. And the category of book is really important here. It's like something written down. Even Jesus was believed to have been given a book as a prophet, and his book was called the Injil, or the Gospel. So for the Quran, it appears that Muhammad's understanding of Jesus is that he was given a book. This book would have essentially confirmed the Torah, which was the book given to the prophet Moses, with maybe some minor, changes or updates. But both of them would be considered prophets whose message was essentially the same. So what happened in subsequent Islamic critique of Christianity was the basic idea that, well, God gave the prophet Jesus a book of good news, Injil, but Christians argued over it and divided and ended up making 4 gospels out of what was one book, the one gospel, Injil, that was given to Jesus. So our 4 gospels became a major point of critique for Islam. It's also worth noting, as I do in that chapter, that of all the prophets that Muhammad mentions, or the Quran mentions, Muhammad's own biography seems most readily intertwined with the way the Noah story is told. I won't go into details because I know I mentioned that already in the book, but it is interesting. The other thing that's quite unique to the Quran, again, certainly nothing that I could find or that other scholars have been able to find in preceding Jewish literature, was the story of Noah's son, a son who refused to board the ark because he was sure he could just go to higher ground and be okay, and then he drowned. And God says to Noah, don't grieve. He's not part of the family. He's not really your child, because your family are those who listen and obey, essentially. One of the lines I really like in this chapter is in the middle of 123. I had already quoted it earlier. A Rabbi Levi, when he was speaking about Abraham and his challenge to God before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then I use it again in this chapter, that basically Abraham said to God, if you want to have a world, there can be no justice. And if justice is what you want, there can be no world, which is like a real dose of reality. Kind of like, yeah, you can have all your ideals about justice, but, spend any time in the world in which we live, and you realize that you're going to have compromises to get along. I really also think it's worth noting that the rabbinic tradition had a less than stellar take on Noah. We read that Noah walked with God, but Abraham was commanded to walk before God. That stuff's on page 124. And this is another classic point of where the rabbis might very well be making more out of a pronoun than they really, or not, a preposition than they really warrants, but it's part of the fun of the rabbinic tradition, such that even, again, I mentioned, and it's worth for you knowing, bottom of 124, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, who was smuggled out of Jerusalem during the Roman siege before the city was destroyed in the year 70. He was smuggled out in a casket, went to a Roman governor, not Pilate, but somebody, and said, hey, have some mercy on us, and do you mind if I start a school? And apparently he got permission to start this rabbinic school that, they chose a great location. They were in what's now called Jaffa, a city in Israel that's beautifully located on the Mediterranean Sea, just a little south of Tel Aviv. I've been able to spend a little time there. I might have even mentioned to you all, I think it was you all, my absolutely gorgeous Sunday afternoon at Netanya Beach, summer of 99 or 2000, and that's just north of Jaffa. That was a great Sunday. Well, anyway, Yohanan ben Zakkai wrote that Noah lacked faith. Had not the water reached his ankles, he would not have entered the ark. Great line. Obviously nothing that's in the Bible, but I love the next comment from a Jewish writer that's probably the guy that's had the most influence on me in the Jewish tradition, David Hartman. He's now passed away, but he was an Orthodox but very, very progressive, politically progressive philosopher, rabbi philosopher. It was at his school that I was privileged to study in January of 1987 for a month. Oh my goodness, Hartman, what a guy. So quotation from Hartman from his book, fabulous book called A Living Covenant. Noah never achieves the stature of a responsible covenantal human, like somebody who stands up before God and, stands up as a human and takes responsibility and, is mature. He responds to God. He never initiates. And so then at the bottom there, so do we know Noah or not? I had a lot of fun with, that's a nice last paragraph if I say myself, the tendency both in Jewish tradition and then especially in the Quran to really whitewash, there's another word I want to use, what's that word with the painting that's It's not whitewashing it. It's not spray paint. Make cars look really shiny. You know what I'm thinking of. To do this with the biblical characters so that they're better moral examples. And really in the Quran, that's what they become. They're moral examples. So the notion that the Genesis could talk about Noah getting drunk from the wine, the vineyard that he plants after the flood, and he makes wine. And you know, the rabbis are not, they don't approve of this. And so that definitely colored their view of Noah. You don't get any story like that in the Quran. And because it's not there, Muslims would see this as a corrective to Genesis. Like, so, okay, so Noah, or Genesis says Noah got drunk. The Quran only praises Noah for his faithfulness and obedience to God. Therefore, the story of him becoming drunk, and in fact in Genesis the only words he ever says are the words of a curse upon his son. That's interesting, isn't it? In other words, I think the rabbinic tradition isn't so far off to go like, let's hold off on how much praise we heap on this guy. Yes, he was righteous in all of his generation, but that only meant he was righteous compared to everybody else. It was no real feather in his cap. The rabbis just, not all, but the tradition overall kind of bent over backwards to say, you know, not such a great reboot for humanity. And it's a very realistic take, right? So, you know, I mentioned down there, so do we like the Quranic stereotype that in fact was picked up to a great extent by Christianity before Islam? Noah's mentions in the New Testament tend to be pretty positive. And even in Judaism, other than the rabbinic tradition, later, or along with it, there were Jewish takes on Noah that were more about how good an example he could be. So I submit, I read at the end, that while the Noah of rabbinic interpretation is no stalwart spiritual giant, he is much more like us, most of us human beings, and thus far more interesting. Well, the Islamic tradition might say, why is that more interesting to you? And in fact, the Islamic tradition would say, it was Jews who told these extra stories about Noah that made him look so bad, just basically to drag him down to their level. That'd be kind of the basic Islamic approach to this. So I end with an actual, you should know, a little tip of my hat to my absolutely favorite Bible teacher in all of human history, Reuben Welch, who's now 100 years old, and after whom our School of Theology and Christian Ministry has been renamed. A dear friend, teacher, and mentor to me, and one of his favorite sayings to start a sentence with is, I think, and then whatever it is. And it's kind of a way of saying, you know, I'm not totally sure about this, but here's what I think, or at least I think this is what I think. Oh, I like that. So I had to do a little Reuben nod here. I think that's the Noah I prefer to know. So that's a little backdrop on the Noah chapter. For Wednesday, we can certainly talk about any of these chapters, but our reading for Wednesday, I really love the upcoming chapter a lot, the Sign of Sinai. So read that for Wednesday, but I'm always open to questions or discussions from previous chapters. Blessings, and see you Wednesday.